Up next on American Black Journal, a unique project tells the stories of 100 Detroiters who are trying to make a difference in the city. I talked with a British artist who's put together a human atlas of Detroit. We'll also talk with best-selling author Roxane Gay about her views on the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. Don't go away. American Black Journal starts now.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Detroit has a really rich history, and a new interactive project is chronicling the lives of 100 people who have been social change makers in the city. I.Detroit, a human atlas of an American city, features digital photography, in-depth oral histories, and DNA ancestral data. The project comes together in the form of a coffee table book and photo recognition app. It was funded by the Kresge Foundation and supported by the Charles H. Wright Museum. I talked with the man behind the initiative, British artist Marcus Lyon. So, a human atlas of Detroit. It's such a wonderful idea. I love the idea of atlases, and I love the idea of featuring Detroiters. Tell us and our viewers here how you came up with this idea.
I've been working in social enterprise all my life alongside my artistic practice. And over a number of years, I'd wanted to do really deep portrait projects, looking at a cohort of amazing people. And we decided back in 2014 to do one in Brazil. I married a Brazilian. I've got a couple of Brazil-English children. And we felt it was a brilliant opportunity to explore the country, or one of the nations of our growing family. And we brought together 100 extraordinary Brazilian social change makers with sound and ancestral DNA. And at that stage, we just thought we were doing a big portrait project and it might lead to something. The work's been collected by the Smithsonian, the book has gone global, and actually one of them landed on the desk of one of your city's elder statesmen in Detroit. He saw it, rang us up and said, please, 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 can you come and do a human atlas of Detroit? So the human atlas of Detroit, I.Detroit, a human atlas of an American city, was born from that journey.
Yeah. So I often ask people from other places this question. Talk about your impression of the city when you got here and saw it for the first time. What left a mark on you about Detroit and Detroiters?
Well, I'd always been excited to come to Detroit proper. I've been coming through the city for many years. I've got a sister who lives in northern Michigan, up in the Leelanau Peninsula. So, I was familiar with Michiganders. I was familiar with Detroit as a concept, but I hadn't really got under its skin. I think the process of doing a human atlas is to study a place very deeply, do a lot of research, get to listen to a lot of people. Really, in essence, a human atlas is a listening project from us as artists. And we were just blown away by the welcome, the warmth, the grittiness. But I think in many ways it was the resilience of your people and of your compadres in the city that struck us the most. I mean, we've we've really ended up with some fabulous friendships in the city, and we're deeply proud to say that we have people in Detroit.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the people who make up the 100 in this atlas.
Well, what we've done is we build these atlases on a foundation of a nomination process. So the first move we made was to sit and to explain what we were hoping to do to a host of 50 community leaders and social change agents in the city. A group of sort of elder and actually younger, but of stateswomen and statesmen in that change space. And we explained what we were going to do, and they gave me pretty big grilling, actually, asked some very difficult questions, some challenging questions, which I enjoyed. Obviously, I just managed to get across the line, and they said very, very clearly, we'd love to be part of this. So that group of people formed the core of our nomination process. And they nominated a group of people from across the neighborhoods, across the different areas of work, water, housing, racial equity, the arts, creativity, entrepreneurs, and all those people were then brought together by our production team, and we worked through a list of 200 plus people to find our final 100. Now, in that 100, you've got, this wonderful tapestry of different people from the different communities of Detroit. To name a few always feels really unfair. To put it this way, we've got some household names in there. Jessica Care Moore's in there, Marsha Music's in there. We all know these people. We love them. We love their creative output. But we've also got some real unsung heroes. Benita Bradley, who works out in the Osborne district. People who are doing really the hard work. Monica Lewis Patrick, We the People of Detroit. John George out in far northwestern Detroit, doing all that amazing work with the Artist Village. I mean, we've got this incredible group of people, and I have to say it was an utter joy and a complete honor to record their stories and to be the portal within which a much broader audience can truly understand Detroit and see it for what it is. Because obviously your story is often told through the eyes of people who have a lot of preconceptions about Detroit. Fair enough, you've got a big presence in the world, but people come to Detroit and I think they go looking for a story that they've already written in their head. And then they go and look for the things to back that up. What we did is we came to Detroit with the intention of telling your story with your words.
Yeah, I mean, you really do get an appreciation for just the sprawl of humanity, I guess is maybe the phrase that best describes the people who live here and how diverse and rich that sprawl is. Talk to me about the ancestral data part of this storytelling too, which I think is a really interesting dynamic to add to that narrative.
I mean, I think the ancestral DNA mapping it's a very popular place for people right now, reaching out to have a deeper understanding of who they are and where they're from. In this project, actually with I.Detroit, we went further than we had before, and we analyzed the Y and the mitochondrial DNA, the father's line and the mother's line. So looking at a deep historical journey out of Africa. But on the sort of geographical origins piece, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool for us to understand how deep our origins are and how interconnected with each other we all are. And I think obviously with our, looking at the true demography of Detroit, 82% African American, obviously from that diaspora, you're looking at some very deep and dark and difficult stories. But what I think the DNA allows is a deeper knowledge and a sense of connection and an explanation, and I think a knowledgeable, factual-based journey with science and DNA to understand who we really are. So, yeah, I mean, we always like to think in terms of the Human Atlas that the photography and the soundscapes, which is kind of the basis of the book, we've got this sort of X and Y axis. But then if you really want to have a three-dimensional book, you need as you would say, the Z-axis. You need something that is, and it's that historical Z-axis that we get with the DNA. So in a sense, the book, even though it's totally two-dimensional and the photographs are two-dimensional, that that ancestral DNA piece gives it kind of depth and flesh, and it puts something on the bones of the book that really is very powerful.
What message do you think people who aren't from here would take away from looking at this book? And I'm glad you brought up the photography. I mean, the photography is just tremendous in this atlas. They're living pictures, I feel, of all of these faces and all of these people who are part of our city. But what would somebody who's not from here draw away from this narrative?
I think that, I'm obviously an outsider, and I was challenged, and rightly so, at many stages of the project of, why are you the person who should come and tell our story? And I think that's born a little bit from the number of people who've told your story badly or inaccurately. But I also think it's a very relevant question. So in a sense, I can answer it from my own perspective. I've looked at Detroit for 3 years. I've researched it. I've listened to it. I've fallen in love with it. And the book really brings, you come away with this sense of love, a love for the place, a really deep commitment to community and neighborhood, despite all the challenges, the funding challenges, the racial inequality challenges, the systemic inequality challenges that many of the people who are in the book face. And I think that that's really powerful. And I mean, it was our intention from the beginning to have, some superstars in the book, but a few. But really, we wanted to tell the story of the unsung hero of Detroit, the unsung shero of Detroit. The people who were doing the hard work, but maybe didn't get the publicity, maybe didn't get the, the oxygen of their story being heard. So, I mean, I think as an outsider, it was fascinating. Having said that, and I think this is a really important point, we've had an incredible reaction to the book inside Detroit. Wow. And so many people have told us. I mean, we had Shirley Stan Carter, who's been an enormous guide to us, who obviously is very well known in your community, but for your wider audience, she's one of the key leaders in the city, especially in terms of racial equity piece. She looked at the book. She knew a lot of people from the book. She helped me with the nomination process in depth. But she said what was amazing was even though she knew these people for 35 years plus, the book allowed her to know these people on a deeper level. That she found out stories about people that she didn't know, and she knew these people intimately. And perhaps even more importantly, it was her 10-year-old and 4-year-old grandchildren who sat with the book, took it off her on a Sunday, grabbed their mobile phones and were listening to all the stories, looking for the heroes in their midst. And in a sense, I think that was my biggest intention, my biggest outcome from the project, my hoped for outcome was that young people in Detroit would see the opportunity they have to serve their community and to live perhaps not in the shadow of those who came before, but in honor of them, to build on those legacies of the people who are in the book.
Wow. Marcus Lyon, incredible work. It is an incredible book. And I feel like 20, 30, 50 years from now, there'll be this wonderful look into what our city was in the early 21st century. Thank you very much for being here with us on American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been an honor, and it was an absolute honor to record, listen, research, and tell your story. Thank you, sir.
Best-selling author Roxane Gay was the guest at this year's Contemporary American Authors Lecture Series at the Mary Grove Conservancy. Detroit Public Television and PBS Books collaborated on the virtual event titled Creatives in a Time of Crisis. I had the pleasure of hosting this discussion, and I talked with Gay about the pandemic, about the Black Lives Matter movement, and a number of contemporary issues. I would love to hear your take on what's going on and what we should be making of the opportunity for change right now.
In some ways, I have no idea what's going on because everything feels so uncharted and unprecedented. In a normal world, we would have a government that saw that we were facing a coronavirus pandemic and do something about it. And instead, we live in a world where our government has literally chosen to do nothing about it, has hoped that perhaps it might just run its course like it's a common cold. And against that backdrop, we also have an administration that is trying to take away health care from more than 20 million Americans. We have a government that is actively interested in disenfranchising the most marginalized voters. And we have an administration that does not care about the millions of Americans who are currently going hungry and who are struggling to find ways to take care of their children while they also work full-time jobs when most school systems are not functioning. It's incredibly chaotic. And then, of course, there is also the ongoing systemic racism and protests against police brutality, extrajudicial murder, and just the casual indifference of police departments everywhere to Black lives. It's overwhelming. And I think a lot of people are incredibly overwhelmed with how do you even begin to synthesize what's happening when it all seems so terrible?
Are there things about this movement this summer that give you hope? One that has stuck out to me, and it's a stat I've been quoting everywhere I go. I think I read it in the New York Times. 23 million people have participated in some form in BLM protests, which makes it the largest social movement in the history of the United States. And if you think about that, that means it's larger than the civil rights movement. It's larger than the anti-war movement against Vietnam. It's larger than suffrage. That to me says we are closer to the precipice of change, perhaps, than we've been before. Of course, you've got to harness that and employ it in a way that makes the change. But I wonder if there are things that for you say this is a different moment than past moments, in that we will get something substantive.
I don't know if we will, but I am deeply encouraged by the scope of the current movement and how many different kinds of people are participating. I think we do have the broadest coalition of people committed to change that we've ever had. It's just a question of who holds the real power. We are going to see people in power who, people in judicial power who stand against pretty much everything equality related. And so, I don't know, it's just so hard. Checks and balances is not working right now, but people are protesting, and the protesting is unrelenting, which is so amazing. And every single protester who has been out in these streets wearing their masks and doing their best to social distance while making clear that they're not going to let up and they're going to continue to hold local governments and local police departments accountable. I think it's amazing. And I hope that we can find a way to capitalize on this moment and all of this amazing political energy that has been generated from the grassroots level, because it's not really happening at the federal level.
You, of course, are an artist and somebody who has created, I would imagine, both in crisis and out of crisis. But let's talk first about the relationship between art and crisis. It seems to me that some of the most important art, of course, comes from pain or trauma or tension, which are sort of at the root of crisis. But I guess one question is, are the two sort of inexorably tied together? In other words, is there an inherent link between great art and crisis?
I think there's an inherent link between a lot of different things, and certainly great art and crisis have a significant relationship and have throughout history. When you look at a lot of the great literature, the great art, the great music that has been created throughout history, it has risen out of protest, it has risen out of revolution, it has risen out of people deciding that enough is enough and it's time for a change to come. And we also, I think, see great art that rises out of joy, that rises out of progress, because those things create possibility where previously there was none. And that's the great thing about art. There is no moment to which art cannot rise. And I think that's what keeps artists going during times like this, when things seem hopeless and where a lot of us have lost our income for the year, if not longer. The only solace is that we still get to create.
Your own work, of course, the work that I think most people identify you with, your memoir, is about it is about personal trauma and tension, and you're drawing on that to find hope and to find identity and strength and identity. Walk us through that process for you, leaning into pain, leaning into trauma to try to create great art.
Yeah, certainly. When I wrote Hunger, I was very interested in writing a book about what it means to live in a fat body in a world that does not welcome or accommodate fat bodies. And of course, to do that required facing some difficult truths and making myself vulnerable in ways that were deeply uncomfortable. But I also knew that it was necessary. When I first thought about writing Hunger, I was terrified. And that's how I knew it was the right book to write. Anything that intimidates or terrifies me tends to be a site of really great potential creatively. And so I had to find a way to balance my absolute fear and terror of writing this book with the actual writing of the book. And it certainly wasn't easy, but to see how the book has resonated with people, to see the kinds of people the book has reached, has let me know that, I would not wish suffering on anyone. And I do not believe that you have to suffer to make art. I think that's nonsense. But I do know that something productive rose out of my suffering. And for that, I'm grateful.
When you're doing your current work at the New York Times, which I find really interesting, it's different than a lot of the other things that you've done. It's about work and people's lives at work. Talk about how these other kind of issues that you've been so steeped in for so long influence how you tell people about their workplaces.
Certainly. I write a column for the New York Times called Work Friend, and every other week I answer questions from people about their work lives. And the reality is that everyone has someone they hate at their job who hates them, or a boss who's incompetent, or they are in a toxic environment. And I try to offer the best advice I can. The challenge in offering people advice about work is that very few people are in a position to fight the good fight without consequence. The easy answer to almost every question I get is quit your job. But the reality is that very few people can simply just quit their job. And so it's challenging. And the reasons that they can't quit their job are because while they may have a so-called good job, the economy is right now in tatters. And they may not be able to find a position that will compensate them the way their current position will, or they might not be able to get a good recommendation from their current employer. Or a lot of industries are in fact very small. And so if they leave one position, they might get sort of a scarlet letter because they might be seen as problematic for leaving one job. And so I try to take all of this into account and give the most empathetic advice that I can, while also realizing that we live in the real world and it's not so simple as saying quit your job when very few people can do that. Yeah. And so how do you tell people to deal with a terrible work environment when they have really very limited options?
That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for watching. You can always go to AmericanBlackJournal.org to learn more about our guests. And you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Stay well, and we'll see you next time.